The morning sun barely crept over the horizon when Sarah Martinez wiped the sleep from her eyes. Another night of 3 hours rest. Another day of pretending everything was fine. The small apartment in Albuquerque, New Mexico smelled like burnt coffee and yesterday's mac and cheese. Her daughter Emma, only 7 years old, was still asleep in the bedroom they shared. Sarah had given up her own space 6 months ago when the bills started piling up faster than she could count them. She stood in front of the cracked bathroom mirror, pulling her dark hair into a ponytail. The reflection staring back looked older than her 32 years. Dark circles under her eyes told stories of sleepless nights and endless worry. But she forced a smile anyway. Emma needed to see her mother strong, not broken. The clock on the wall read 5:30 in the morning. Sarah moved quietly through the small kitchen, preparing Emma's lunch for school. Peanut butter and jelly again. She made a mental note to pick up some ham at the discount store if she had any money left after paying the water bill. Her hands worked automatically, spreading the peanut butter thin to make the jar last longer. Her phone buzzed on the counter. A text from her landlord. Rent was due in 3 days. Sarah closed her eyes and took a deep breath. She had maybe half of it saved. The other half would have to come from somewhere, somehow. 6 years ago, life looked completely different. She had been married to Marcus, a man who promised her the world and delivered nothing but pain. He left when Emma was barely 1 year old, disappeared like smoke in the wind. No child support, no forwarding address, just gone. Sarah tried to track him down for the first year, but eventually gave up. Some battles weren't worth fighting. She finished packing Emma's lunch and walked to the bedroom. Her daughter lay sprawled across the twin mattress, her blonde hair fanned out on the pillow. Sarah's heart swelled. Everything she did, every sacrifice, every sleepless night was for this little girl. Emma was her world, her reason to keep fighting when everything seemed impossible. "Wake up, sunshine," Sarah whispered, gently shaking Emma's shoulder. Emma stirred and opened her eyes, smiling immediately when she saw her mother. "Morning, Mama." They went through their morning routine with practiced efficiency. Breakfast was cereal with milk. Sarah had stretched by adding a little water. Emma didn't notice, or if she did, she never said anything. That kid had more emotional intelligence than most adults Sarah knew. At 7:15, they walked to the bus stop 3 blocks away. The October air had a chill that cut through Sarah's thin jacket. She needed a new one, but that was at the bottom of a very long list of things she needed and couldn't afford. Emma chattered about a project at school, something about the solar system. Sarah listened, asked questions, tried to be present even though her mind was already racing through the day ahead. The yellow school bus pulled up with a loud hiss of brakes. Sarah kissed Emma's forehead and watched her climb aboard. The little girl waved from the window, and Sarah waved back until the bus disappeared around the corner. Then she allowed herself exactly 30 seconds of worry before straightening her shoulders and heading to work. Sarah worked 2 jobs. During the day, she waited tables at Rosie's Diner on Route 66, a classic American restaurant that attracted tourists and locals alike. The tips were decent when the tourists were feeling generous. At night, 3 times a week, she cleaned offices downtown. Between both jobs, she barely made enough to keep the lights on and food on the table. But Sarah had a secret, a skill she kept hidden, tucked away like a treasure she was afraid to share. She knew engines. Not just knew them, she understood them. Could take apart a carburetor blindfolded and put it back together better than new. Her father had been a mechanic in Texas, and she grew up in his garage, learning everything he knew. She had magic hands, he used to say. Could diagnose a problem just by listening to an engine run. But that was before Marcus convinced her that fixing cars wasn't ladylike. Before he made her feel small for getting grease under her fingernails. Before she believed that her dreams didn't matter. After he left, she was so focused on survival that she never thought about going back to what she loved. The diner paid immediately. Cleaning offices paid cash. Mechanics' apprenticeships took time she didn't have. Rosie's Diner was already busy when Sarah arrived at 8. She tied her apron around her waist and grabbed her order pad. The familiar rhythm of work took over. Coffee refills, orders called to the kitchen, smiles plastered on even when customers were rude. She moved between tables with practiced grace, balancing plates and defusing complaints with charm. During her lunch break, Sarah sat in the back alley, eating leftover toast and scrolling through her bank account on her phone. $237. Rent was $600. She had 3 days. Her stomach twisted into knots. Her coworker Linda stepped outside for a cigarette. "You look stressed, honey." "Just the usual," Sarah replied, forcing a smile. Linda was 50-something with bleached blonde hair and a heart bigger than Texas. She had been working at Rosie's for 15 years and knew everyone's business. "You need money? I might know a guy who needs some cleaning work done." Sarah perked up. "Really? How much?" Linda shrugged. "He owns that motorcycle shop on Central. Iron Horse Garage. His cleaning lady quit last week. Probably pays cash. Want me to give him your number?" "Absolutely," Sarah said quickly. "Thank you, Linda." "Seriously." Linda waved her off. "Us single moms gotta stick together, right?" The rest of the day passed in a blur of orders and fake smiles. When Sarah's shift ended at 3, she picked up Emma from school and they went home. While Emma did homework at the kitchen table, Sarah called the number Linda had given her. A gruff voice answered. "Iron Horse Garage." "Hi, my name is Sarah Martinez. Linda from Rosie's Diner gave me your number. I heard you might need a cleaning person?" There was a pause. "Yeah, we do. Can you start this week?" "Absolutely. What days do you need?" "Mondays and Thursdays, late evening after we close. 7 to 9. $50 each night, cash." "Perfect," Sarah said, relief flooding through her. "I can start this Thursday." "Good. Come by Thursday at 7. Ask for Hank." He hung up without saying goodbye. Sarah stared at her phone. $100 extra a week. It wasn't much, but it was something. It was hope. Thursday evening arrived faster than expected. Sarah dropped Emma off at Linda's apartment. Linda had offered to watch her for free, refusing to take any money despite Sarah's protests. She drove her old Honda Civic across town to Central Avenue. The car made a concerning rattling noise, but Sarah ignored it. One problem at a time. Iron Horse Garage sat on a corner lot, a large building with motorcycles parked out front. The neon sign buzzed in the dusk. Sarah could hear loud rock music and male laughter coming from inside. She hesitated for a moment before pushing open the door. The garage was massive. Motorcycles in various states of repair filled the space. Tools hung on pegboards. The smell of motor oil and metal filled the air. And everywhere, bikers. Big men with leather vests, tattoos covering their arms, beards that reached their chests. They all turned to look at her when she walked in. Sarah suddenly felt very small and very out of place. An older man with gray hair and a weathered face approached her. "You Sarah?" "Yes, sir." "Sarah Martinez." "I'm Hank." He gestured around. "This is the place. Bathrooms need cleaning, floors need mopping, windows need wiping. All the cleaning supplies are in that closet over there. Think you can handle it?" "Absolutely," Sarah said with more confidence than she felt. "Good. We'll be working for another hour, then we clear out. Just ignore us." Hank walked away before she could respond. Sarah found the cleaning supplies and got to work. She started with the bathrooms, scrubbing toilets and sinks while trying not to think about what kind of men used these facilities. The bikers ignored her mostly, continuing their work on the motorcycles. Their conversation was loud, filled with curse words and laughter that echoed off the concrete walls. She was mopping the main floor when she heard it. A motorcycle engine struggling to turn over. The sound made her stop. She knew that sound, recognized it immediately. Fuel pump issue, maybe a clogged filter. Easy fix if you knew what you were looking for. One of the bikers, a huge man with a long red beard, was cursing at the bike. This piece of junk. Third time this week. Sarah bit her tongue and continued mopping. Not her business. She was here to clean, not to offer mechanical advice. But her eyes kept drifting to the motorcycle. Her hands itched to help. The biker kicked the bike in frustration. "Anyone here know what's wrong with this thing?" Several men gathered around, offering suggestions. "Wrong suggestions." Sarah listened to them debate, her frustration growing. They were making it more complicated than it needed to be. Before she could stop herself, the words tumbled out. It's probably your fuel pump. Every head in the garage turned to stare at her. The silence in the garage was deafening. Sarah felt her face flush hot as 20 pairs of eyes locked onto her. The mop handle suddenly felt heavy in her hands. What had she been thinking? These weren't the kind of men who appreciated unsolicited advice, especially not from the cleaning lady. The biker with the red beard straightened up, his massive frame towering over the motorcycle. He looked at her with narrowed eyes. "Excuse me?" Sarah swallowed hard, but something inside her refused to back down. "Your fuel pump. The sound it's making, that stuttering before it dies, that's classic fuel delivery issue. Probably a clogged filter or the pump itself is going bad." Another biker, this one with a shaved head and a scar running down his cheek, laughed. A harsh, mocking sound. "The cleaning lady thinks she knows bikes now. That's rich." Heat crept up Sarah's neck. She should have kept her mouth shut, should have stayed invisible like she always did. But she could hear her father's voice in her head from all those years ago. "If you know something is wrong and you say nothing, you're part of the problem." "I grew up in a garage," she said quietly. "My father was a mechanic in Houston for 30 years. I've been around engines my whole life." "Houston? Huh?" The scarred biker smirked. "That explains the accent. Let me guess. Daddy taught you how to change oil and now you think you're a real mechanic?" The other men laughed. Sarah felt something crack inside her chest. This was exactly why she had stopped. Why she had let Marcus convince her she wasn't good enough. Why she had buried this part of herself for so long. Because every time she tried, someone was there to remind her that women didn't belong in garages. Hank emerged from his office, drawn by the commotion. "What's going on out here?" "New girl thinks she knows what's wrong with Jake's bike," the scarred man said, jerking his thumb at Sarah. Hank looked at her, his expression unreadable. "That right?" Sarah wanted to disappear, to grab her cleaning supplies and run out the door. But Emma's face flashed in her mind. Her daughter needed to see her mother stand up for herself. Needed to learn that being a woman didn't mean making yourself small. "Yes, sir," Sarah said, her voice steadier now. "I think it's the fuel pump. I could be wrong, but that's what it sounds like to me." Jake, the red-bearded biker, crossed his arms over his chest. "All right, cleaning lady. You seem pretty confident. Why don't you prove it?" "Jake, come on man," another biker interjected. "She's just here to clean." "No, I'm serious," Jake said, his eyes never leaving Sarah's face. "If she knows so much, let her show us. Put your money where your mouth is, sweetheart." The challenge hung in the air like smoke. Sarah's heart pounded against her ribs. She hadn't touched an engine in years. What if she was wrong? What if she embarrassed herself in front of all these men? But what if she was right? "Okay," she heard herself say. "I'll look at it." The garage erupted in surprised murmurs. Hank raised an eyebrow but said nothing. Jake stepped back from the motorcycle, gesturing with mock chivalry. "Be my guest." Sarah set down the mop and walked over to the bike. Her hands were shaking slightly as she knelt beside it. The motorcycle was a beautiful machine, a custom Harley with chrome that caught the fluorescent lights. But beauty didn't matter if the engine wouldn't run. She closed her eyes for a moment, letting the years fall away. She was 12 years old again, standing in her father's garage while he taught her how to listen. "Engines talk to you, Mija," he used to say. "You just gotta learn their language. Can you try to start it again?" she asked Jake. He climbed on and turned the key. The engine tried to turn over, sputtered, died. Sarah listened intently. There it was, that telltale hesitation. "Do you have a fuel pressure gauge?" she asked. The scarred biker, whose name she learned was Derek, snorted. "Oh, now she wants tools. This should be good." Hank walked to a toolbox and pulled out a gauge. He handed it to Sarah without a word. She could feel everyone watching her, waiting for her to fail. Her hands fumbled with the gauge at first, her nervousness making her clumsy. She heard a few chuckles behind her. "Take your time, princess," Derek called out. "We got all night." Sarah forced herself to breathe. "Forget them. Focus on the bike. She connected the gauge to the fuel rail and asked Jake to turn the key again. The needle barely moved. There, she said, pointing to the reading. Your fuel pressure is way too low. Should be around 55 psi for this model. You're getting maybe 20. The pump isn't delivering enough fuel to the engine. Jake leaned over to look at the gauge. His expression shifted from skepticism to surprise. She disconnected the gauge and stood up, wiping her hands on her jeans. They came away black with grease. Old habit. Could be a clogged filter or a dying pump, she continued. I'd start by replacing the filter since that's cheaper. If that doesn't fix it, then you know it's the pump itself. The garage had gone quiet. Sarah looked around at the faces staring at her. Some looked impressed. Others looked annoyed. Derek looked furious. Lucky guess, he muttered. That wasn't luck, another biker said. A younger guy with kind eyes. She knew exactly what she was doing. Hank walked over and inspected the gauge reading himself. He nodded slowly. She's right. Fuel pressure is shot. Jake ran a hand through his beard, looking at Sarah with new eyes. I'll be damned. When did you say you learned this? My father owned Martinez Auto Repair in Houston, Sarah said. I started helping him when I was 8. By the time I was 16, I could rebuild a transmission. So why are you mopping floors? The young biker asked. Sarah's jaw tightened. Life happened. I have a daughter to support. 2 jobs to keep us afloat. Sometimes you do what you have to do, not what you want to do. The words came out harder than she intended. The truth of them stung her own ears. When had she become this person? When had she let her dreams die? Derek wasn't finished. Okay, so you got lucky on one diagnosis. That doesn't make you a mechanic. Anyone can read a gauge. Sarah turned to face him. The anger she had been swallowing for years started bubbling up. You want another one? Point me to any bike in here having issues and I'll tell you what's wrong with it. Derek's eyes flashed. You're on. He walked over to a Yamaha in the corner. This one's been giving us hell for 2 weeks. Won't idle right. Keeps dying at stoplights. Sarah approached the bike, that old familiar excitement starting to override her nervousness. Can I start it? Knock yourself out. She started the engine. It ran rough, the idle jumping erratically. She listened for 30 seconds, then asked for a screwdriver. Someone handed her one. She made a small adjustment to the idle screw, listened again, adjusted once more. The engine smoothed out, purring like a contented cat. Your idle air control valve is sticking, she said. Probably carbon buildup. You could clean it or replace it. The adjustment I just made is a temporary fix, but it'll hold for a few days. Hank walked over and listened to the engine. The corner of his mouth twitched. Sounds good. Derek's face had turned red. Fine. You know bikes. Congratulations. But knowing and doing are 2 different things. You think any customer is going to trust their bike to some woman who shows up in cleaning clothes? The words hit Sarah like a physical blow. Because he was right. It didn't matter how skilled she was. The world didn't work that way. She had learned that lesson over and over again. Enough, Hank said sharply. Derek, take a walk. I'm just saying what everyone's thinking, Derek shot back. I said take a walk. Derek glared at Sarah one more time before storming toward the back of the garage. The tension in the room was thick enough to cut. Sarah's hands were shaking again, but this time from anger rather than nerves. She had proven herself and it still wasn't enough. It would never be enough. Not for men like Derek. Not in a world that saw women as decorations in garages, not technicians. Sorry about him, Jake said quietly. Derek's got issues. Don't we all? Sarah muttered. She walked back to her mop, her moment of triumph already feeling hollow. She finished cleaning in silence while the bikers gradually returned to their work. The camaraderie from before was gone. Sarah felt like an outsider again. Worse than before, actually. Now she was the outsider who had dared to step above her station. At 9 o'clock, the bikers started packing up their tools and heading out. Hank appeared from his office with a $50 bill. Sarah took it, mumbling her thanks. You did good work tonight, Hank said. Both kinds. Thank you, Sarah replied. I'll be back Monday. As she drove home in her rattling Honda, tears finally came. Tears of frustration and anger and grief for the life she could have had. She was good at something, really good, and it didn't matter. She would still go home to her tiny apartment, still split peanut butter thin on sandwiches, still lie awake worrying about rent. When she picked up Emma from Linda's place, she plastered on a smile. "How was your night, baby?" "Good," Emma chirped. "Miss Linda let me watch a movie." "How was work?" "Fine," Sarah lied. "Just fine." That night, after Emma was asleep, Sarah stood at the kitchen window looking out at the Albuquerque skyline. Somewhere out there were people living their dreams, building the lives they wanted. But not her. Never her. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "This is Jake from Iron Horse. Got your number from Hank. Look, what you did tonight was impressive. Real impressive. Would you be willing to look at my bike again this weekend? I'll pay you for your time." Sarah stared at the message for a long time. This could be something. Or it could be another setup for humiliation. But the money would help. And maybe, just maybe, it could be the start of something more. She typed back, "What time?" Saturday morning arrived with the kind of crisp autumn air that made Albuquerque beautiful. Sarah dropped Emma off at a birthday party for one of her classmates, grateful for the 3 hours of coverage it provided. She had agreed to meet Jake at Iron Horse Garage at 10. As she pulled into the parking lot, her stomach churned with nervous energy. The garage looked different in daylight, less intimidating somehow. Only a few motorcycles sat outside. She checked her reflection in the rearview mirror. Hair pulled back, old jeans, a worn flannel shirt that used to be her father's. She looked like a mechanic. She felt like an imposter. Jake was waiting by the entrance, his red beard braided today. He smiled when he saw her. "Thanks for coming. I wasn't sure you would." "I needed the money," Sarah said honestly. "What's going on with the bike?" "Well, I replaced the fuel filter like you suggested. Started right up. Ran perfect for 2 days. Now it's acting weird again. Different problem this time." They walked inside. The garage was quieter with only Jake and 2 other bikers present. The young one with kind eyes from Thursday night waved at her. The other was an older man she didn't recognize. No sign of Derek or the others. Sarah felt some of the tension leave her shoulders. The Harley sat in the middle bay. Jake started it up and Sarah immediately heard the issue. The engine ran, but there was a metallic ticking that shouldn't be there. "How long has it been making that noise?" she asked, kneeling beside the bike. "Started yesterday. Gets louder when I accelerate." Sarah listened carefully, her ear close to the engine. The sound was rhythmic, consistent. She asked Jake to rev it. The ticking increased in frequency but not volume. "When did you last check your valve clearances?" she asked. Jake scratched his beard. "Honestly, I'm not sure. Maybe never on this bike." Sarah nodded. "That's your problem. Your valves need adjusting. The clearances have gotten too tight over time. That ticking is metal on metal contact. If you don't fix it soon, you'll damage the valves." "Can you do it?" Jake asked. Sarah hesitated. Adjusting valves was precise work. It required patience and the right tools. It had been years since she had done it. "But I can," she heard herself say. "How much?" The question caught her off guard. She had no idea what to charge. What was fair? What was too much? What would make them take her seriously? 150, she said, pulling a number from thin air. Jake didn't even blink. "Deal. When can you start?" "Now, if you have the tools I need." They spent the next 4 hours working on the bike. Sarah fell into the rhythm she remembered from her youth. Her hands knew what to do even when her mind doubted. She removed the valve cover, measured each clearance with feeler gauges, calculated the shim. Sizes needed, made the adjustments. Jake watched for a while, asking questions, then left her to work. The young biker, whose name was Tommy, brought her water and asked if she needed anything. He seemed genuinely interested in what she was doing, not in a condescending way but with real curiosity. "Where did you learn all this?" Tommy asked, watching her work. "My dad," Sarah said, not looking up from the valve train. "He believed girls could do anything boys could do. Maybe believed it a little too much." She smiled sadly. I spent every weekend in his garage instead of at the mall with other kids. Sounds like a good dad. The best. Sarah's throat tightened. He died 5 years ago. Heart attack at 62. He never got to meet Emma. I'm sorry, Tommy said quietly. They worked in comfortable silence after that. Sarah lost herself in the mechanical puzzle, the precision required, the satisfaction of getting everything perfectly aligned. This was meditation. This was home. When she finally buttoned everything back up and started the engine, the ticking was gone. The Harley purred smooth and strong. Jake came running from the office. Listen to that. He was grinning ear to ear. It sounds brand new. Just needed some adjustment, Sarah said, wiping her hands on a rag. You should check your valve clearances every 10,000 miles or so. Keeps everything running smooth. Jake pulled out his wallet and counted out $150 in cash. Then he added another $50. That's for doing it on a weekend. You saved my butt. I got a ride plan next week and I need this bike perfect. Sarah stared at the money in her hand. $200. For doing something she loved. Something that didn't feel like work at all. Listen, Jake said, his tone turning serious. We have a proposition for you. The older biker Sarah hadn't met stepped forward. Name's Pete. I own this garage with Hank. We've been talking. Sarah's heart started racing. This could go either way. Pete continued. We lost our best mechanic 3 months ago. Guy moved to Colorado. We've been limping along since then, turning away work we can't handle. Hank told us what happened Thursday night. Jake told us what you just did here. We want to offer you a job. The world seemed to tilt sideways. A job? Here? Part-time to start, Pete said. Weekends, maybe some evenings. We'll pay you $25 an hour, cash under the table until we see how it works out. If it goes well, we can talk about making it official, benefits, the whole deal. Sarah's mind was spinning. $25 an hour. That was more than both her other jobs combined. But could she do this? Could she really step back into this world? I have a daughter, she said. I can only work when she's covered. We'll work around your schedule, Jake said. Tommy here can watch the front when you're in the bay. We just need someone who knows what they're doing. What about Derek? Sarah asked. The question had been burning in her mind. He made it pretty clear I wasn't welcome. Pete's expression darkened. Derek doesn't run this shop. I do. And frankly, his attitude has been a problem for a while now. You proved yourself. That's all that matters to me. Sarah looked down at the money in her hands. $200 for 4 hours of work doing something she loved. She thought about Emma, about the rent, about the life they could have if Sarah stopped just surviving and started actually living. But fear crept in. What if she failed? What if she made a mistake? What if Derek was right and customers wouldn't trust her? Listen, Pete said, reading her hesitation. I get it. This is scary. But I've been in this business 40 years. I know talent when I see it. You got something special. Be ashamed to waste it mopping floors. The words hit home. How long had she been wasting herself? Playing small? Accepting less than she deserved because she was afraid? If you're watching this and you've ever doubted yourself, ever wondered if you should take that leap, I want you to know something. Sometimes the scariest decisions are the ones that change everything. Sometimes you have to bet on yourself even when you're terrified. And if this story is resonating with you, if you're rooting for me to take this chance, do me a favor and subscribe to this channel. Because what happens next you won't want to miss. Sarah took a deep breath. Okay, I'll try it. Weekends to start. Jake hooped and clapped her on the shoulder. Welcome to Iron Horse, Sarah. They shook hands, worked out the details. She would start next Saturday. 8 hours. $200. Felt surreal. Like she was living someone else's life. When Sarah picked up Emma from the birthday party, her daughter immediately noticed something different. You look happy, Mama. I am, baby, Sarah said, and realized it was true. I really am. That evening, Sarah called Linda and told her everything. Linda screamed so loud Sarah had to pull the phone away from her ear. I told you, Linda shouted. I knew that place would be good for you. You really did, Sarah laughed. Thank you for giving me Hank's number. Girl, you did this yourself. I just opened a door. You walked through it. After hanging up, Sarah sat at her kitchen table with Emma doing a puzzle beside her. She looked at the $200 spread out in front of her. It was more than money. It was possibility. It was hope. Her phone buzzed. Another text from Jake. Forgot to mention, we got a vintage Indian motorcycle coming in next week. Engine completely seized. Owner wants a full rebuild. You interested? Sarah's fingers flew across the keyboard. Absolutely. She set down her phone and smiled. For the first time in 6 years, she felt like herself again. Not just a waitress. Not just a cleaning lady. Not just a struggling single mom barely keeping her head above water. She was Sarah Martinez, mechanic, and she was just getting started. Emma looked up from her puzzle. Mama, why are you crying? Sarah wiped her eyes, laughing. Because I'm happy, sweetheart. Because things are finally getting better. Emma hugged her tight. I'm glad, Mama. You deserve to be happy. Out of the mouths of babes, Sarah thought. Maybe she did deserve happiness. Maybe it was okay to want more. Maybe it was okay to take up space in a world that constantly told her to shrink. The next morning, Sarah called Rosie's Diner. She didn't quit, not yet, but she dropped down to 4 days a week instead of 5. The office cleaning job she kept for now. The money was still necessary, but she had taken the first step toward building something different. Monday evening at Iron Horse was quiet. Hank was in his office. Tommy was sweeping the floors. Jake was working on a carburetor at one of the benches. Sarah cleaned the bathrooms, mopped the floors, same as always. But it felt different now. She wasn't just the cleaning lady anymore. She was part of something. Hank called her into his office before she left. Sit down for a minute. Sarah sat, nervous again. Had they changed their minds? Hank leaned back in his chair, studying her. Pete and I have been talking more about this arrangement. We want to do it right. Not just cash under the table. We want to bring you on officially. Sarah's eyes widened. But you said. I know what I said. But I've been watching you. The way Jake talks about what you did Saturday. The way you carry yourself around the bikes. You're not dabbling in this. This is who you are. He pulled out a folder and slid it across the desk. This is an employment contract. $25 an hour to start, bumping to $30 after 3 months if things work out. Health insurance after 90 days. 2 weeks paid vacation after a year. Standard stuff. Sarah stared at the papers like they might disappear if she blinked. This was real. This was actually happening. I can't promise it'll be easy, Hank continued. Some of the old-timers are going to give you grief. Derek especially. And customers might be weird at first. But Pete and I got your back. We enforce respect in this shop. Anyone has a problem with you being here, they can take their business elsewhere. Thank you, Sarah whispered. Her voice wouldn't go any louder. I don't know what to say. Say you'll sign the papers and start Saturday. Sarah picked up the pen with trembling hands. She thought about her father, wondered what he would say if he could see this moment. She thought about Emma, about the example she was setting. She thought about every time someone told her she couldn't, she shouldn't, she wasn't good enough. And then she signed her name. The first Saturday as an official mechanic at Iron Horse Garage started before dawn. Sarah woke up at 5, her stomach a knot of excitement and terror. She made breakfast for Emma, packed her lunch, and dropped her off at Linda's by 7:30. Linda squeezed her hand at the door. You got this, honey. Go show them what you're made of. Sarah drove to the garage with her father's old toolbox in the trunk. She had dug it out of storage the night before, wiping years of dust off the red metal. Inside were tools that had shaped her childhood. Wrenches her father had taught her to use. Screwdrivers with worn handles from decades of work. She ran her fingers over them like sacred relics. The garage was already buzzing when she arrived. Pete was at the front desk. Hank was in his office. Jake and Tommy were prepping bikes in the bays. And Derek was there, leaning against a workbench with his arms crossed, watching her walk in. Morning, Sarah said to the room. Most of them responded warmly. Derek said nothing. Pete walked over and handed her a navy blue mechanic's shirt with Iron Horse Garage embroidered on the pocket. And underneath, her name, Sarah Martinez. She stared at it, her eyes burning. Couldn't have you working in street clothes, Pete said with a smile. Welcome to the team. She changed in the bathroom, and when she emerged wearing that shirt, something shifted inside her. She belonged here, not as a visitor, not as a charity case, as a mechanic. All right, listen up, Pete called out to the crew. Sarah's officially part of the team now. She's got the rebuild on the Indian plus whatever else needs attention. Treat her like you'd treat any other mechanic here. With respect. His eyes lingered on Derek as he said that last part. The Indian motorcycle was a 1947 Chief, a gorgeous piece of history that someone had let deteriorate. The engine was completely seized, the chrome was pitted, the leather seat was cracked. But underneath all that neglect was a masterpiece waiting to be restored. Sarah spent the first hour just assessing the damage, taking notes, creating a game plan. The owner, a collector named Mr. Brennan, wanted it perfect. He was paying top dollar for a full restoration. No pressure, right? As she worked, she could feel Derek watching her, waiting for her to make a mistake. She forced herself to ignore him, to focus on the engine block she was disassembling. Each bolt she removed brought her deeper into the puzzle. This was a catastrophic rebuild. The pistons were scored, the cylinder walls were scratched, the crankshaft was damaged. Whoever had run this engine had done it hard and dry. Jake wandered over during lunch. How's it looking? Worse than I thought, Sarah admitted. This engine was run without oil. Maybe the pump failed, maybe someone forgot to check it. Either way, almost everything internal needs replacing. Can it be saved? Absolutely. Just gonna take time and the right parts. Jake nodded appreciatively. Mr. Brennan chose the right shop. And the right mechanic. Over the following weeks, Sarah fell into a rhythm. Weekends at Iron Horse, weekdays split between the diner and cleaning offices. It was exhausting, but in a different way than before. Now she was tired from pursuing something meaningful, not just from surviving. The Indian rebuild consumed her. She sourced parts from specialty suppliers across the country. She measured and remeasured every tolerance. She consulted with vintage motorcycle forums late at night after Emma went to bed. The bike became her obsession in the best possible way. Tommy started hanging around her bay whenever he had free time, asking questions, learning. He reminded her of herself at that age, hungry to understand how things worked. She taught him everything she could, the way her father had taught her. But Derek remained a constant shadow. He would make comments just loud enough for her to hear. Things like must be nice getting special treatment or I wonder how long before she makes a costly mistake. Sarah gritted her teeth and kept working. 3 weeks into the job, it finally came to a head. Sarah was installing the rebuilt engine back into the Indian frame. It was delicate work requiring precision and patience. She had the engine suspended on a hoist, carefully maneuvering it into position. Derek walked by and bumped the hoist, causing the engine to swing. Watch it, Sarah snapped, steadying the engine. Sorry, Derek said with zero sincerity. Maybe you should be more careful. Something inside Sarah snapped. She set down her tools and turned to face him. What is your problem with me? Derek straightened up, his scarred face twisted in contempt. My problem? You want to know my problem? You waltz in here, play the victim card, and suddenly you're one of the guys? I've been working on bikes for 20 years. 20 years. And they bring in some soccer mom who changes a fuel filter and acts like she's Evel Knievel. The garage had gone quiet. Everyone was watching now. I never asked for special treatment, Sarah said, her voice shaking but strong. I came here to clean bathrooms. You all saw me diagnose those bikes. I earned this position. You earned nothing, Derek shot back. Pete felt sorry for you. Single mom sob story. They're just being politically correct, hiring a woman to look progressive. The word stung because part of Sarah feared they might be true. Had she really earned this? Or was it charity? That's enough, Derek. Hank's voice cut through the tension. He emerged from his office, his expression hard as stone. I'm just saying what needs to be said, Derek argued. No, you're being a sexist jerk because you feel threatened, Hank said. Sarah has proven herself every day since she started. The Indian rebuild alone is work you couldn't handle. Derek's face turned purple. Are you kidding me right now? I'm dead serious. You're a decent mechanic, Derek, but you're not exceptional. Sarah is exceptional. And your ego can't handle that a woman is better at this than you. The silence that followed was deafening. Derek looked around the garage at the other mechanics. None of them came to his defense. Jake was shaking his head. Tommy looked embarrassed for him. Pete stood by the door with his arms crossed, backing up Hank completely. Unbelievable, Derek muttered. He ripped off his Iron Horse shirt and threw it on the ground. I'm done with this place. Your choice, Pete said calmly. Pick up your final check on Friday. Derek stormed out, slamming the door so hard the windows rattled. Sarah stood frozen, her heart pounding. Part of her felt victorious. Part of her felt sick. She had never wanted to cause problems. Never wanted to be the reason someone lost their job. He made his choice, Hank said, reading her expression. This has been building for months. You were just the excuse he was looking for. Sarah nodded, not trusting her voice. Now, Hank continued, addressing the whole garage. Let me be crystal clear. Sarah belongs here. She's earned her spot. Anyone who has a problem with that can follow Derek out the door. Otherwise, we got work to do. The tension gradually dissipated. Mechanics returned to their bays. The normal sounds of the garage resumed. But Sarah felt different. Lighter somehow. Like a weight she didn't know she was carrying had been lifted. Jake walked over and squeezed her shoulder. That took guts, standing up to him. I'm tired of making myself small, Sarah said. Tired of apologizing for taking up space. Good. Don't ever apologize for being good at what you do. The weeks that followed were transformative. Without Derek's negativity poisoning the atmosphere, the garage felt different. Lighter. More like a team. Sarah threw herself into the Indian restoration with renewed focus. She worked on the chrome, polishing it until it gleamed. She rebuilt the carburetor from scratch. She rewired the entire electrical system. She sourced original leather for the seat and had it professionally restored. Every detail mattered. This bike was going to be perfect. Mr. Brennan stopped by occasionally to check progress. The first time he saw Sarah working on his bike, his eyebrows shot up. You're the mechanic? Yes, sir, Sarah said, bracing for the usual comments. But Mr. Brennan surprised her. He walked around the bike, examining her work closely. Then he smiled. My grandmother was a mechanic during World War II. Built airplane engines while the men were overseas. She was the best mechanic in her factory. You remind me of her. Sarah felt tears prick her eyes. Thank you. That means everything. As Christmas approached, the Indian was nearly complete. Sarah had been working on it for almost 3 months. Every evening after Emma went to bed, she researched, planned, perfected. The bike had become more than a job. It was proof. Proof that she belonged. Proof that she hadn't lost her gifts. Proof that starting over was possible. The weekend before Christmas, Sarah invited Emma to the garage for the first time. Her daughter's eyes went wide at all the motorcycles. You work here, Mama? This is so cool. Sarah showed her the Indian, now fully assembled and gleaming like new. What do you think, baby? This is beautiful, Emma breathed. You made this? I fixed it. Brought it back to life. Like magic. Sarah laughed. Sort of like magic. But with a lot of tools and grease. Pete called everyone together. Time for the moment of truth. Mr. Brennan was coming tomorrow to see the finished bike. But first, they needed to make sure it actually ran. Sarah's hands trembled as she checked the fuel one more time, verified the electrical connections, confirmed the oil level. Everything was perfect. It had to be perfect. You ready? Jake asked. Ready as I'll ever be. She climbed on the bike, feeling the weight of everyone's expectations. This was it. Months of work coming down to this moment. She turned the key, pressed the starter. The engine turned over once, twice, then it caught. The sound that filled the garage was music. The Indian Chief roared to life, its engine purring with a deep, throaty rumble that spoke of power and precision. The sound of something broken being made whole again. Everyone erupted in cheers. Emma jumped up and down, clapping. Sarah sat on that bike, tears streaming down her face, and felt something she hadn't felt in years. Pride. Not just pride in the work. Pride in herself. In who she was becoming. In the life she was building. That night, as she tucked Emma into bed, her daughter looked up at her with sleepy eyes. "Mama, you're like a superhero." Sarah kissed her forehead. "We all are, baby. We just have to remember it sometimes." Christmas morning arrived with snow falling on Albuquerque, a rare and magical sight. Emma squealed with delight, pressing her face against the window. Sarah watched her daughter's joy and felt her heart swell. This Christmas was different. For the first time in years, they weren't just surviving. They were actually living. Under their small tree were more presents than Sarah had been able to afford in previous years. Nothing extravagant, but enough. A new doll Emma had been wanting. Art supplies, books, and for Sarah, Emma had made a card at school. On the front, she had drawn a woman with a wrench, standing next to a motorcycle. Inside, in wobbly 7-year-old handwriting, "You are the best mama and the best mechanic in the world." Sarah held that card and cried happy tears. The day after Christmas, Mr. Brennan came to pick up the Indian. He walked into the garage with his wife, both dressed elegantly despite the casual setting. Sarah had the motorcycle positioned in the center bay, cleaned and polished to perfection, gleaming under the lights like a jewel. Mr. Brennan stopped dead in his tracks. His wife gasped. "Oh my God," Mr. Brennan whispered. He walked slowly around the bike, his eyes taking in every detail. The chrome sparkled. The paint was flawless. The leather seat looked brand new. The engine, visible through the custom work, was a work of art. "This is impossible," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I bought this bike at an estate sale. It was a rusted heap. I almost used it for parts, but something told me to save it." Sarah stepped forward. "Your instinct was right. This bike has good bones. It just needed someone to believe in it." Mr. Brennan ran his hand over the seat, then looked at Sarah. "How did you do this? This isn't just a rebuild. This is resurrection." Sarah smiled. 3 months of work. We sourced original parts where we could, custom fabricated what we couldn't find. The engine was completely rebuilt. New pistons, new cylinder walls, new crankshaft. The electrical system was rewired from scratch. Every bolt was replaced. Every surface was restored. "Can I start it?" Mr. Brennan asked, his eyes shining. "Please do." He climbed on the bike with the reverence of someone mounting a thoroughbred. He turned the key and the engine roared to life with that same perfect sound from the test run. Mr. Brennan sat there, listening to the engine, and Sarah saw tears on his cheeks. "My father had one of these," he said quietly. "A 1947 Chief. He rode it until the day he died. I always regretted not keeping it. When I saw this one, even in that terrible condition, I knew I had to try to save it." He climbed off and pulled out his checkbook. "What's the damage?" Pete stepped forward with the invoice. "We estimated $3,500 for the rebuild. But Sarah here put in about 60 extra hours. She sourced parts from 6 different states, some of them collectors who didn't want to sell. She custom fabricated pieces that don't exist anymore. Honestly, sir, this bike is worth 10 times what we're charging you." Mr. Brennan didn't hesitate. He wrote a check for $5,000 and handed it to Pete. Then he pulled out another check and handed it directly to Sarah. "This one for $2,000. That's your bonus. You didn't just fix a motorcycle. You gave me back a piece of my father." Sarah stared at the check, unable to speak. $2,000. In her hands. For doing work she loved. "Thank you," she finally managed. "This bike was an honor to work on." Mr. Brennan shook her hand firmly. "If I buy another vintage bike, you're the only person I'll trust with it." After Mr. Brennan and his wife left, riding the Indian out of the garage like royalty, Pete turned to Sarah with a grin. "That," he said, "is how you build a reputation." The bonus money changed everything. Sarah was able to catch up on bills that had been hanging over her head for months. She paid her rent 3 months in advance. She bought Emma new winter clothes that actually fit. She replaced the tires on her Honda that had been bald for far too long. And she opened a savings account, something she never thought she'd be able to do. But more than the money, the Indian restoration brought something else. Clients. Word spread through the vintage motorcycle community about the mechanic in Albuquerque who could bring dead bikes back to life. Within 2 weeks, Iron Horse had 3 more restoration projects booked. Pete pulled Sarah aside. "I need you full-time," he said. "I know you've got the diner and the cleaning gig, but I'm ready to offer you 40 hours a week here. $30 an hour. Full benefits. What do you say?" Sarah felt dizzy. Full-time. As a mechanic. It was everything she had dreamed of but never dared to hope for. "I need to give my other jobs notice," she said. 2 weeks at the diner, probably the same for the cleaning company. "Fair enough." Pete smiled. "Welcome to your new life, Sarah." That evening, Sarah sat down with Emma and explained that things were going to change. "Mama's going to be working different hours now. More during the day, which means you'll go to after-school care. But it also means more money, better insurance, a real future for us." Emma hugged her tight. "I'm proud of you, Mama." The transition wasn't seamless. Leaving Rosie's diner was harder than Sarah expected. Linda cried and made her promise to visit. The other waitresses threw her a small party during her last shift. Even some of the regular customers came to wish her well. "You're going to do amazing things," Linda said, hugging her goodbye. "I always knew you were meant for more than this." The cleaning job was easier to leave. Just a phone call, 2 weeks' notice, and she was done. No emotional attachments there. Just relief at not having to scrub toilets anymore. Her first week as a full-time mechanic at Iron Horse was intense. She arrived at 8 and left at 5, covered in grease and exhausted but happier than she had been in years. Emma adjusted to after-school care surprisingly well, making new friends and joining an art club. Sarah took on more complex projects. A Ducati that had been in a crash. A vintage Triumph with electrical gremlins that had stumped 3 other shops. A custom chopper that needed a complete engine swap. Each challenge made her better, sharper, more confident. Tommy became her unofficial apprentice, shadowing her whenever possible. She taught him everything her father had taught her, passing down knowledge the way it was meant to be passed down. One evening, after a particularly difficult carburetor rebuild, Tommy looked at her with awe. "You make it look so easy," he said. Sarah laughed. "It's not easy. It's just practice. Thousands of hours of practice. You'll get there." In February, something unexpected happened. A woman walked into the garage, looking nervous and out of place. She was young, maybe 25, with grease stains on her jeans and hope in her eyes. "I heard there's a female mechanic here," the woman said to Pete. "That would be Sarah." Pete pointed to the bay where Sarah was elbow-deep in a Kawasaki engine. The woman approached slowly. "Hi, my name is Maria. I've been trying to get into motorcycle mechanics, but no one will hire me. They all say I need experience, but how do I get experience if no one will give me a chance?" Sarah saw herself in this young woman, saw the desperation and determination. She wiped her hands on a rag and smiled. "What do you know about bikes?" "Everything I could learn from YouTube and books," Maria admitted. "But I know that's not the same as real experience." Sarah looked at Pete, who was watching from across the garage. "We could use another set of hands," she said. "Someone willing to learn?" Pete walked over, assessed Maria with a critical eye. "You willing to start at the bottom? Sweeping floors, organizing tools, watching and learning?" "Absolutely," Maria said quickly. "I'll do anything." "All right. Minimum wage to start. We'll see how you do." Maria's face lit up like Christmas morning. "Thank you. Thank you so much. You won't regret this." After Maria left with instructions to start Monday, Pete shook his head with amusement. "You're building an empire of female mechanics here." "Maybe the world needs one," Sarah replied. As winter turned to spring, Sarah's life continued to transform. She was making enough money to move into a better apartment, a 2-bedroom place where Emma could have her own space. They picked it out together, Emma's excitement infectious. Sarah signed the lease with a sense of accomplishment that made her giddy. The new apartment had a small garage space. Sarah asked Pete if she could buy some used tools from the shop. Instead, he gave her a toolbox full of equipment. "Every mechanic needs a home setup," he said. "Consider it a promotion gift." "Promotion?" Sarah asked. Pete grinned. Senior mechanic. 45 an hour. Plus, you're now in charge of training new hires. Starting with Maria. Sarah's eyes filled with tears. Again. She seemed to cry a lot these days. But they were good tears. Grateful tears. I don't know how to thank you, she said. Keep being excellent. That's thanks enough. Maria turned out to be a quick learner. Hungry for knowledge the way Sarah had been. Watching her grow reminded Sarah how far she had come. From the cleaning lady who nervously mentioned a fuel pump issue to a senior mechanic training the next generation. One Saturday in April, Jake pulled up on his Harley, the one Sarah had first worked on. He climbed off and gave her a hug. Listen, we're doing a charity ride next month. Raising money for children's hospitals. I want you to ride with us. I don't have a bike, Sarah said. Jake grinned. Actually, you do now. He gestured to a covered motorcycle in the corner of the garage. We all chipped in. Consider it a thank you for everything you've done for this place. Sarah pulled back the cover and gasped. It was a beautiful Harley Sportster. Midnight blue with silver accents. Not new, but perfectly maintained. And on the tank, custom painted, were the words, Sarah's ride. She couldn't speak, couldn't breathe, could only stare at this gift that represented so much more than a motorcycle. Your family now, Jake said simply. Family takes care of family. The charity ride was 3 weeks later. Sarah rode with Emma on the back, her daughter's arms wrapped tight around her waist. They rode with 50 other bikers through the New Mexico desert, the sun warm on their faces, the wind in their hair. Emma laughed with pure joy, and Sarah felt free in a way she never had before. At the hospital, they presented a check for $20,000. Sarah watched the staff's faces light up, knowing this money would help children fighting battles far bigger than her own struggles had been. On the ride home, Emma shouted over the wind. This is the best day ever, Mama. Sarah smiled under her helmet. It really was. 2 years later, Sarah stood in front of the mirror adjusting her collar. The navy blue shirt still had Iron Horse Garage embroidered on the pocket, but now underneath her name was a new title, Shop Manager. Emma, now 9 years old, poked her head into the bathroom. Mama, we're going to be late for the ceremony. I'm coming, baby. Just making sure I look professional. You always look professional, Emma said matter-of-factly. Even with grease under your fingernails. Sarah laughed and grabbed her keys. They climbed into her truck, a newer model Ford F-150 she had been able to purchase 6 months ago. No more rattling Honda. No more praying the engine would start. This truck was reliable, powerful, and perfect for hauling motorcycle parts. The drive to the Albuquerque Community College took 20 minutes. Sarah had been invited to speak at their automotive technology program graduation. When the department head called with the invitation, Sarah had almost said no. Public speaking terrified her. But then she thought about all the young people, especially young women, who might need to hear her story, who might need permission to pursue their dreams. The auditorium was packed with graduates in caps and gowns, their families filling the seats. Sarah sat on the stage with other speakers, her palms sweating. Emma sat in the front row next to Linda, who had closed Rosie's Diner for the afternoon to be here. Pete and Hank sat beside them, along with Jake, Tommy, and Maria. Maria had blossomed in 2 years. She was now a full mechanic at Iron Horse, specializing in vintage restorations. She had even taken on her own apprentice, another young woman named Sophie who reminded Sarah so much of herself at that age it was almost eerie. The dean introduced Sarah, rattling off accomplishments that still felt surreal. Senior mechanic turned shop manager at Iron Horse Garage. Specialist in vintage motorcycle restoration. Featured in Classic Motorcycle magazine for her work on rare Indian and Triumph motorcycles. And most recently, founder of Women Who Wrench, a non-profit organization teaching mechanical skills to women and girls. Sarah walked to the podium, her legs shaking. She looked out at all those faces and took a deep breath. 2.5 years ago, she began. I was mopping floors in a motorcycle garage. I had 2 jobs, a 7-year-old daughter, and about $300 to my name. I was exhausted, broke, and convinced that my dreams had died years ago. She told them about that night. about hearing the motorcycle engine struggle, about the words tumbling out of her mouth before she could stop them, about Derek's mockery and the moment she almost gave up. But something inside me refused to stay quiet anymore, Sarah continued. Something that my father planted in me when I was 8 years old, turning wrenches in his garage in Houston. The knowledge that I was good at this, that I belonged in spaces people told me I didn't. She talked about the fear, the doubt, the voices in her head that said she wasn't good enough, smart enough, strong enough. The nights she cried herself to sleep wondering if she had made a terrible mistake. But here's what I learned, Sarah said, her voice growing stronger. Your worth isn't determined by who believes in you. It's determined by whether you believe in yourself. And sometimes believing in yourself means taking terrifying leaps. It means saying yes when everything in you wants to say no. She told them about the Indian restoration, about Mr. Brennan's tears, about the doors that opened because she was willing to walk through the first one. Today, Iron Horse Garage has 4 female mechanics. 4. In an industry that's still 95% male. We have a waiting list of clients that stretches 6 months. We've trained 12 apprentices in the last 2 years. And we've shown a lot of people that skill has no gender. The audience applauded. Sarah saw Emma beaming at her from the front row. But I'm not telling you this to brag, Sarah said. I'm telling you this because someone in this room needs to hear it. Someone here has a dream they've buried, passion they've hidden, a talent they've been told doesn't matter. And I want you to know that it's not too late. It's never too late to become who you were meant to be. She shared the statistics she had learned. How women make up only 2% of automotive technicians. How that number drops even lower in motorcycle mechanics. How the industry was losing talented people because they were told they didn't belong. We can change that, Sarah said. We have to change that. Because the world needs your gifts. All of them. Not just the ones people are comfortable with. After the ceremony, graduates and their families surrounded Sarah. Young women asked for advice. Parents thanked her for being a role model. One mother, tears streaming down her face, told Sarah that her daughter had been afraid to pursue automotive technology until she read about Sarah in the local newspaper. You gave her courage, the mother said. You showed her it was possible. Later that evening, Iron Horse Garage hosted a small celebration. Pete had ordered pizza and beer. The whole crew was there, along with some regular clients who had become friends. Even Mr. Brennan showed up, riding his restored Indian. He pulled Sarah aside. I have something for you. He handed her an envelope. Inside was a check for $5,000 made out to women who wrench. Mr. Brennan, this is too much, Sarah protested. It's not enough, he corrected. My granddaughter is 10 years old. She wants to be a mechanic. Because of you, she believes she can be. That's worth more than any amount of money. Sarah hugged him, this elegant man in his 70s who rode a vintage motorcycle and believed in changing the world one girl at a time. As the party continued, Sarah stepped outside for air. The Albuquerque sunset painted the sky in shades of orange and pink. She thought about how far she had come. From that scared woman mopping floors to this. Manager, business owner, advocate, mother raising a daughter who believed women could do anything. Jake joined her, 2 beers in hand. He passed her one. Thinking deep thoughts? Just grateful, Sarah said. For all of it. For you giving me a chance that Saturday. For Pete and Hank believing in me. For every person who saw something in me when I couldn't see it in myself. You did the work, Jake reminded her. We just opened the door. You walked through it. They stood in comfortable silence, watching the sun sink lower. You know what the crazy part is? Sarah said. I'm happier now, making decent money as a mechanic, than I ever could have been making twice as much doing something I hated. There's something about doing what you love, about using the gifts you were given, that makes everything else worth it. Jake nodded. That's the secret nobody tells you. Success isn't about the money. It's about going to bed at night knowing you're exactly where you're supposed to be. Emma burst through the door. Mama, Maria says she's going to teach me how to change oil tomorrow. Is that okay with you? Maria asked, following Emma outside. More than okay, Sarah said, pulling her daughter close. That's perfect. The next morning, Sarah stood in her garage at home working on a custom project. A client had commissioned her to build a bike from scratch, combining vintage aesthetics with modern performance. It was the kind of challenge she lived for now. Her phone rang. An unknown number. She almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. "Is this Sarah Martinez?" A woman's voice asked. "Yes, this is she. My name is Jennifer Cole. I'm a producer for a show called American Garage on the Speed Network. We're doing a series on innovative mechanics around the country, and your name keeps coming up. We'd love to feature you and Iron Horse Garage in an episode." Sarah sat down hard on her workbench. "A TV show? Featuring her? I don't know what to say," Sarah admitted. "Say yes," Jennifer laughed. "We want to tell your story. Show young people, especially young women, that they can build careers in trades, that they can break barriers and change industries. Your story is exactly what we're looking for." After the call ended, Sarah sat in her garage surrounded by tools and motorcycle parts, and she thought about that scared woman from 2.5 years ago, the one who almost didn't speak up, the one who almost stayed small. "Thank you," she whispered to that version of herself. "Thank you for being brave." 3 months later, the episode aired. Sarah watched it with Emma curled up beside her on their couch in their nice apartment. She saw herself on screen, covered in grease, explaining engine mechanics with confidence and joy. She saw her team at Iron Horse, the family she had found. She saw Emma in the background of one shot, watching her mother work with pride shining in her eyes. The response was overwhelming. Women Who Wrench received hundreds of emails from women wanting to learn. Iron Horse got calls from across the country. Sarah's social media exploded with messages of support and gratitude. But the message that meant the most came from an email address she didn't recognize. The subject line read, "From Houston." Sarah opened it with trembling hands. "You don't know me, but I knew your father. I worked with him at the garage for 15 years. I just watched your episode and I cried like a baby. Carlos would be so proud of you. He always said you had magic in your hands. He was right. Thank you for honoring his memory by becoming exactly who he raised you to be." Sarah read the email 3 times, tears blurring the words. Then she closed her laptop and walked to Emma's room. Her daughter was already asleep, her arms wrapped around a stuffed animal that wore a tiny mechanic's uniform Sarah had sewn. She kissed Emma's forehead and whispered, "We did it, baby. We really did it." As Sarah got ready for bed that night, she looked at herself in the mirror. The woman staring back looked tired but happy, older but stronger. She had grease under her fingernails and hope in her heart. Tomorrow she would wake up early. She would drop Emma at school. She would go to a job she loved, surrounded by people who respected her. She would work on machines that made sense, that could be fixed, that responded to skill and care. She would live the life she was meant to live. And it had all started with one terrifying moment of courage. One decision to speak up instead of staying silent. One choice to believe she was worth more than the world told her she was.